My ex, Alex, wants a paternity test after abandoning us, claiming one of our twins isn't his. Let me just say, this entire situation with Alex is a disaster, and it's been one issue after another since we split. I thought things were tough when he left me during my pregnancy with the twins, but it turns out that was just the beginning. Now, he's hit me with the most absurd demand, yet he wants a DNA test for our youngest, Lila, because apparently she doesn't look enough like him, and he's convinced I must have cheated. Let me backtrack a bit. Alex and I were together for a few years, and everything seemed fine until it wasn't. When I got pregnant with twins, Luke and Lila, he started to emotionally distance himself, barely contributing and finding excuses to stay late at work. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs, but I was too busy managing the pregnancy and trying to keep things stable. When I was 6 months along, he dropped a bombshell he was leaving. Just like that, he was gone, and he didn't even stick around for the birth. I had to handle everything by myself, which was incredibly tough. Luke came out looking like a mini version of Alex, no doubt about it. Lila, on the other hand, has darker, curly hair and slightly different features she takes after my grandmother, who had mixed heritage but passed as white. I never thought much of it, since babies come in all shapes and looks, but Alex and, more importantly, his new wife Fiona are making it a big issue. Oh, Fiona. I could write an entire novel about her. She's the woman Alex left me for, and from the moment she appeared, she's tried to worm her way into my children's lives, acting like she's their mother. The kids don't like her, understandably. I mean, who would be fond of the person your dad left your mom for? Fiona keeps trying to get them to call her mama, but they won't, and I don't even have to intervene. The kids are smart enough to see through the nonsense. Now, here we are, fast forward 5 years, and out of nowhere, Alex is claiming that Lila isn't his. At first, I thought it was some kind of bad joke. Like, really, she's your daughter. You weren't physically there when she was born, but we were still married at the time, and your name is on the birth certificate. Now, suddenly, because Fiona doesn't think Lila looks like him or her twin, Luke, he's demanding a paternity test. Clearly, Fiona put this idea in his head, there's no doubt about that. What frustrates me the most is that Alex never had any issues paying child support before. He did it, not out of goodwill, but because he didn't want to end up in trouble with the courts. But recently, he's been trying to cut back on the amount, claiming he's facing financial difficulties. Yeah, sure, maybe he wouldn't be struggling if he didn't waste money on his latest expensive hobby or whatever new thing he's into. Anyway, I found out about the whole paternity test demand from his sister Maggie, before Alex even bothered to tell me. Maggie has been my only ally through all of this. She's the only one from Alex's side who still talks to me. She told me that Alex and Fiona had been spreading word that they want a paternity test for Lila, and that he plans to stop paying child support if it turns out she isn't his. Maggie also let slip that Alex and Fiona have been struggling financially again, which wasn't exactly a surprise. He's even been skipping his weekends with the kids, claiming he has to work overtime, but I suspect there's more to the story. When I confronted Alex, his reasoning was ridiculous. Lila doesn't look like me or you, he argued, like he had some profound insight into genetics. I explained that family traits can be unpredictable and even mentioned my grandmother, but he wouldn't listen. He's convinced himself that I cheated on him and that he's been supporting another man's child all this time. I told him directly that if he wanted a paternity test, he'd need to take me to court. I wouldn't let him intimidate me. He tried to play the I can't afford court card, acting as if I was holding his money hostage by insisting he pay for a child he believes isn't his. It only got worse after that. When I stood my ground, Alex took to Facebook, ranting to anyone who'd listen about how I tricked him into signing the birth certificate and how I'm supposedly forcing him to pay for a child that's not his. Maggie sent me screenshots of his posts, which were full of lies. He wasn't even present when Lila was born, but because we were still legally married, his name was automatically added to the certificate. Now he's acting as if I forged the whole thing. Of course, his social media rants drew in a crowd of his clueless friends, eager to offer their uninformed opinions. One of them even messaged me, suggesting that I should just agree to the paternity test to clear my name and make things easier for Alex. Yeah, sure, because I'm the one making this situation difficult, right? It's unbelievable. I've started completely ignoring Alex's calls. If he wants to communicate with me, it has to be through text or email so I have a written record. I've learned not to trust him, especially after years of dealing with his nonsense. And honestly, I'm convinced this whole thing isn't really about Lila's paternity, it's about money. With Alex, it always is. Fiona's probably in his ear, encouraging him to cut his losses and stop paying child support. At this point, I'm just exhausted by all of this. He walked out when I was pregnant, barely spends time with the kids, and now he's trying to rewrite history by claiming one of them isn't his. It's pathetic, honestly. But if he thinks I'm just going to let him off the hook, he's mistaken. I'm ready to fight this. Court or no court, I won't let him or Fiona push me around. They can spread all the lies they want, but I know the truth, and deep down, Alex does too. So this is where things stand now. I'm just waiting for him to either back down or take it to court. Honestly, I kind of hope he does. I'd love to see him try to explain this whole mess in front of a judge. Well, things escalated after Alex's paternity test demand. I thought that maybe, just maybe, he'd back off and think things through after I shut him down last time. I mean, if I didn't cheat and I didn't, there's no reason to drag this mess out, right? But of course, Alex doesn't operate on logic. He plays the victim and lashes out whenever he's cornered. This time, he didn't come to me directly. Oh no, he's way too much of a coward for that. Instead, he and Fiona launched a full-blown smear campaign against me. It started subtly, with little digs on social media vague enough that only those close to us would pick up on it. But then things escalated quickly. He didn't stop at trashing me online, he began pulling in family members. One day I got a call from his dad, Phil. I've always liked Phil even after the divorce. He's been fair to me and great with the kids, never letting Alex's drama interfere with his relationship with them. So when he called, I thought it was just a normal check-in. I wasn't expecting him to be all worked up, practically shouting about the absurd things Alex had been telling the family. Apparently, Alex was spreading lies that I'd been cheating on him for the last 2 years of our marriage. 2 years. And not just with anyone. He claimed I'd had an affair with my former co-worker, Steve. First off, Steve is married with kids, and we were literally just colleagues. We barely spoke outside of work. Second, Alex is the one who left me, so this whole narrative of infidelity is ridiculous. Phil knew it was all garbage, but Alex had been telling this story to everyone, including people on Phil's side of the family. Now, I had to do damage control with in-laws who suddenly wondered if there was more to Alex's version than I'd let on. It's incredible how quickly people are willing to believe the worst when they're not directly involved. Some of them reached out to me, acting all concerned but really just fishing for more gossip. You know the type, they pretend to care but are only looking for drama. And then there was Fiona. She was absolutely reveling in it, backing up everything Alex said and acting like she's been around longer than a blink of an eye. I get that she doesn't like me, obviously. We were never going to be friends, but she's taken pettiness to a whole new level. She even went as far as to claim that I tried to trap Alex by getting pregnant with the twins. Seriously? Like I somehow planned for him to abandon me while I was expecting. In her twisted perspective, it makes sense to blame me for everything that went wrong. To make things worse, Alex started posting cryptic messages on Facebook, the kind that doesn't name names but leaves no doubt who he's talking about. Things like, some people are finally getting exposed for who they really are and can't wait for the truth to come out. With winking emojis for good measure. It was childish, but I couldn't help but get angry every time someone sent me a screenshot of his posts. Then, out of nowhere, a friend of Alex's, someone I barely know, messaged me. He said something like, "Hey, you should just get the paternity test, it'll shut everyone up," as if it were that simple. I wanted to throw my phone. It's not about the test, it's about standing my ground. Alex doesn't get to accuse me of cheating just because his life isn't panning out the way he wants. I don't owe him anything, and I certainly don't owe Fiona any peace of mind. But of course it got even messier. Alex didn't just stop at bad-mouthing me and pushing for a paternity test, he dragged Luke and Lila into it. He skipped his scheduled weekend with the kids, which wasn't unusual since he'd been flaking a lot lately. But when I called to find out what was going on, he actually had the nerve to say, "I'm not taking Lila until you prove she's mine." I was speechless for a moment. He was really doing this, punishing our daughter because of some ridiculous notion he's latched onto. I told him straight up, "You don't get to pick and choose which kids you take based on your mood," but he didn't care and doubled down, saying he wouldn't take her until a test was done. I lost it. I told him, "Fine, if you don't want to be a father to Lila, then you don't get to be a father to Luke either. I'm not playing these games. I won't let him mess with the kids' heads, making them think they're only worth his time if they meet some arbitrary standard he's set. If he's going to be in their lives, he's going to be there for both of them." But Alex didn't take me seriously. He just laughed it off and hung up on me. After that, I called Phil again and explained the situation. As I expected, Phil was livid with Alex and said he'd talk to him, but I knew it wouldn't make much difference. Alex is stubborn, and once Fiona plants an idea in his head, reasoning with him is impossible. The worst part. Luke has started asking questions. He's only 5, but kids pick up on things quickly. He noticed when Alex didn't show up and he asked me why his dad didn't want to see them. I had to try to explain in the simplest terms, without making it sound like Alex was abandoning them. I told him that Daddy was busy but that they'd see him soon. But Luke didn't seem convinced, and it broke my heart. I could already see the long-term impact this might have on the kids, and it made me resent Alex even more. All I ever wanted was for them to have a positive relationship with their dad, and he's ruining it because of his ego. Lila, thankfully, is still too young to understand what's happening, but I know a time will come when she asks why her dad behaved this way. And what am I supposed to tell her? That her father refused to see her because he doubted she was his. That's a conversation no parent should have to have with their child. So this is where we stand. Alex is still holding this ridiculous paternity test over my head, and I'm just trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for the kids. It's draining. Each day feels like a new struggle, and I'm constantly bracing myself for the next outlandish move from Alex and Fiona. But I'm not backing down. If he wants to drag this to court, so be it. Until then, he's not going to get away with this nonsense. Update 1. Here's how things spiraled even further. After Alex decided he wouldn't see the kids until I agreed to a paternity test for Lila, I thought things might calm down. I hoped he'd realize how absurd he was being and stop dragging the kids into this mess. But no, Alex doesn't know how to back down. Instead of letting it go, he took things to a whole new level of craziness. Out of nowhere, I got a message from Maggie, Alex's sister. She's been the only one from his family who stayed in touch throughout all this drama. She texted to tell me that Alex and Fiona were planning to sue me for full custody of Luke, just Luke. Apparently, in their twisted logic, since they believe Lila isn't his, they want nothing to do with her. But Luke? Oh, he's definitely Alex's, so they want him all to themselves. When I read that, my mind went blank for a moment. How do you decide to fight for only one of your children? How does that even make sense? But with Alex, poor decisions are his specialty, and this one was no different. I immediately called Maggie to get the full story. She explained that Alex had been telling people I was mentally unstable and that I couldn't handle raising both kids on my own. If you've been following along, you'd know Alex has barely been involved since he left me during my pregnancy. I've been handling everything solo, and the kids are thriving. But now he's trying to paint me as an unfit mother, just to get Luke away from me. Maggie overheard Fiona talking about how they planned to make it look like I'd been neglecting the kids, and that it would be in Luke's best interest to live with them. Fiona doesn't even know Luke. Whenever the kids return from their weekends with Alex, they tell me how Fiona barely interacts with them unless she's ordering them around. She's no mother figure, no matter how much she wants to pretend. After hanging up with Maggie, I sat there, fuming. I knew Alex could be petty, but this was a whole new low. My anger kept building, and all I could think about was how much harm this would do to Luke if they went through with it. How do you tell a 5-year-old that his dad only wants him, not his sister? How do you prevent him from feeling like it's somehow his fault? I decided I couldn't just sit around and wait for Alex to strike first in this custody battle. I started gathering evidence. I had already been saving our conversations, but now I made sure to document everything, including each time he skipped his weekends with the kids. If Alex wanted to play dirty, I'd be ready. But before I could get too deep into preparing for this custody drama, Alex made another bold move. He showed up at my house. He just knocked on my door, acting like we were still on speaking terms. The moment I saw him, I knew he was up to something. He had that smug look, like he was about to cause trouble. "What do you want?" I asked, already irritated before he even opened his mouth. He got straight to the point. "I'm here to talk about Luke. We need to figure out a new arrangement because clearly you can't handle both kids." I felt the anger rising but tried to keep calm. "What are you talking about, Alex? I've been handling everything just fine. You're the one who can't even stick to your weekends," he smirked, enjoying every second. "I think it's best for Luke to come live with me and Fiona full-time. He deserves a stable home, and well, let's just say you're not providing that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You think taking Luke away from his sister is providing stability? Are you serious right now?" Alex just shrugged, acting like it was no big deal. "Lila isn't my kid, so why should I care? Luke needs his father, not to be stuck in your mess." That was it for me. My mess? You walked out on us, you've barely been in their lives, and now you want to play the hero dad with Luke? Get real, Alex. He crossed his arms, clearly enjoying how much he was getting under my skin. "I've already talked to my lawyer. We're filing for custody. I'm not asking you, I'm telling you." At that point, I knew reasoning with him was pointless. He genuinely believed he could just swoop in and take Luke without any repercussions. I slammed the door in his face, and honestly, it was pretty satisfying. The next day, I hired a lawyer. There was no way I'd let Alex just walk in and take my son. We went through the case, and my lawyer assured me I had a solid argument. Alex's lack of involvement, his refusal to care for Lila, and his attempt to use custody as a weapon would all work against him. And here's the kicker: Alex didn't even have the money to follow through with his custody case. Maggie later told me he'd been bluffing, trying to scare me into surrendering Luke without actually going to court. He hadn't even hired a lawyer, he just wanted to intimidate me. Classic Alex. So after all that, his little custody threat went nowhere. But the damage was done. Luke and Lila could sense the tension, and I hated that they were being dragged into this mess. It wasn't fair to them, and I knew it was only a matter of time before Alex tried something else to stir up more trouble. For now, though, I'm staying vigilant, keeping records, documenting everything, and preparing for whatever Alex and Fiona might try next. I'm not backing down, and I'm determined not to let them disrupt my kids' lives any further than they already have. It's exhausting, but at this point I have no other option. It's just another day dealing with Alex's drama, but I'm prepared for whatever comes next. Update 2. After all the chaos with Alex's failed attempt to gain custody of Luke, you'd think he'd back off, right? I mean, how many times can someone mess up their own life? Turns out, with Alex, there's no limit. He always manages to paint himself as the victim, and this time, he reached a new level of absurdity. It started when Luke came home after a weekend with Alex and Fiona, and I could immediately tell something was wrong. Usually, Luke is chatty when he returns, sharing stories about going to the park or playing video games, but this time he was unusually quiet, like he was uneasy or scared. I tried to ask him how his weekend went, but he just shrugged and said it was okay. That's when I knew something was off. Later that night, while I was putting him to bed, I gently asked again, "Luke, is something bothering you? You've been really quiet today." After a moment, he finally opened up. He stared down at his blanket and mumbled, "Daddy said that Lila isn't my real sister." I felt my heart drop. "What do you mean?" Luke, I asked. He looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes and said, "He said Lila doesn't belong in our family because she doesn't look like him." I could barely keep my composure. Alex had actually told our 5-year-old that his sister wasn't really his. The anger I felt in that moment was overwhelming. I had to take a deep breath to keep from scaring Luke, but inside I was seething. I told Luke as calmly as I could, "Lila is your sister. She's your twin. You both grew inside my belly at the same time, and you'll always be family, no matter what anyone says." He nodded, but I could tell he was still confused. How could he not be? His own father was planting doubts in his mind, and it wasn't fair to him or to Lila. After I tucked Luke in for the night, I sat on the couch, fuming. I knew I had to confront Alex, even though I dreaded it. I knew it would just lead to another argument, but I couldn't let him get away with filling our son's head with lies. I grabbed my phone and sent him a text, "We need to talk." "What did you tell Luke about Lila?" I didn't expect a quick response, but my phone buzzed almost instantly. Predictably, Alex denied everything, saying, "I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't say anything like that." Classic Alex, always deny, deny, deny. I wasn't falling for it, though. Luke had no reason to invent something like that. I told Alex as much, and all he could do was deflect, claiming I was confusing Luke by treating Lila like his sister when everyone knows she's not. That was it for me. I called him, and as soon as he picked up, I let him have it. "How dare you say that to our son? What kind of father tries to turn their kid against his own sister?" Alex tried to act casual, like he wasn't doing something horribly manipulative. I was just telling him the truth. He's old enough to understand that Lila isn't really part of my family. I could barely contain my rage. "She's part of your family whether you like it or not. You're on her birth certificate. You've been paying child support for her since day one. Stop trying to mess with Luke's head just because you don't want to face reality." He tried to argue back, but I cut him off. "You're not seeing Luke or Lila until you stop this. I'm done with you trying to turn them against each other." That caught him off guard, but then he switched to his usual victim mode. "Oh, so now you're going to keep the kids from me." Real mature, I wasn't letting him twist things around. "No, I'm not keeping them from you. I'm protecting them from your nonsense. If you can't be a decent father to both of them, then you don't deserve to see either of them." He hung up on me, which was fine. I didn't have the patience to hear more of his excuses. But I knew this wasn't over. Alex doesn't just let things go, and I had a feeling he'd come back with something even worse. Sure enough, the following weekend came, and Alex didn't show up to pick up the kids. I wasn't surprised, but it still stung, especially for Luke. He had been looking forward to seeing his dad even after everything, because he's 5 and doesn't fully understand the situation. When I had to tell him that his dad wasn't coming, the look on his face nearly broke me. He just stood there for a moment, then tried to act brave, saying, "It's okay, Mommy," but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. That night I sat down and wrote out everything that had happened. I knew I needed to document all of this in case Alex tried to pull another legal stunt. I wasn't going to let him get away with this, but I also knew I had to be smart about it. I couldn't just blow up every time he did something awful, no matter how much I wanted to. The following week, Alex texted me as if nothing had happened. "Can I pick up Luke this weekend?" He didn't even mention Lila. I didn't hesitate before responding, "You pick up both of them or none of them. I'm not playing your games." Of course, that set him off. He argued that he wasn't ready to deal with Lila until the paternity test was done, but I stood firm. You don't get to decide when you're ready to be a father. You either are or you aren't. His response made it clear he wasn't happy with my stance, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let him continue this nonsense. If he didn't want to step up and be a dad to both of his kids, I was perfectly capable of handling things on my own. After all, I'd been doing it since day one. So this is where we are. I haven't heard from Alex in a few days, which has actually been a relief, but I know this isn't the end. He'll be back with some new scheme, but I'll be ready. I'm done letting him mess with my kids' lives, and I won't let him treat Lila like she doesn't belong. We're a family, the 3 of us, and nothing Alex says or does will change that. Update 3. After everything that's happened, you'd think Alex would finally understand and stop with his antics, right? But no, that's not how he operates. Just when I thought he couldn't sink any lower, he finds a way to surprise me again. I should have learned by now not to expect anything different from him. This time, though, he really crossed a line. It started with another text from Maggie. By now, she's become my go-to for all the inside scoop on Alex's latest schemes, and honestly, she's probably the only person in his circle who still has some sense. So, when I got a message from her on a random Tuesday afternoon, I knew it wasn't going to be good. She let me know that Alex and Fiona were planning something serious, another legal maneuver. This time they intended to pursue full custody again, claiming I was unfit to care for the kids. Now, I've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. Alex is barely involved with the kids, and Fiona's only connection to them is playing pretend mom whenever it's convenient for her. Yet here they were, trying to paint me as the unfit parent. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony, but it infuriated me. This wasn't just another petty online jab or him skipping a weekend. This was an attack on my ability to care for my children. I didn't waste any time and immediately contacted my lawyer, relaying everything Maggie had shared. Thankfully, I'd been meticulously keeping records of Alex's antics, from his skipped visits to the things he said about Lila not being his. My lawyer assured me that we had a solid case, but the whole situation still hit me hard. No matter how confident I felt, the reality that I had to fight for my right to raise my own children was sickening. The following days blurred together, filled with lawyer meetings, gathering more documentation, and trying to keep everything feeling normal for Luke and Lila. I didn't want them sensing the tension, though it was gnawing at me constantly. Every time I saw their faces, I felt an overwhelming need to protect them from whatever storm Alex was stirring up. Then it happened. Alex officially filed for custody, claiming I was emotionally unstable and couldn't provide a stable home. As I read through the papers, the lies stacked up. He even accused me of alienating the kids from him and using them as pawns to hurt him. Unbelievable, right? Especially considering he's the one skipping weekends and refusing to be there for both kids. While my lawyer remained confident, I couldn't shake my anxiety. Court rulings can be unpredictable, and the mere thought of possibly losing even partial custody terrified me. I knew I had to stay strong because showing any vulnerability would just give Alex ammunition. A few weeks later, our first court date arrived. Walking into that courtroom, I felt like I might be sick. Alex was there, looking as smug as ever, like he had already won. Fiona was by his side, dressed up like she was attending a gala instead of a custody hearing. The way they carried themselves, you'd think they were the perfect parents trying to save Luke from a terrible mother. But then, things took an unexpected turn. As the proceedings unfolded, Alex's lies started to unravel. My lawyer was incredible, laying out all the evidence we had, from the text messages and emails to records of his missed weekends. It all became painfully clear to the judge, and as the case progressed, I could see the confidence drain from Alex's face, and Fiona grew visibly uneasy. The tipping point came when the judge asked Alex why he wasn't fighting for custody of both Luke and Lila. That question completely threw him off balance. He mumbled something about not believing Lila was his and claimed it wasn't worth battling over a child who might not be his. The judge wasn't buying it. She pressed him, asking if he had even taken a paternity test, and when Alex admitted that he hadn't, his entire argument fell apart. The judge sternly reminded him that being a father isn't something you choose when it's convenient. If he was going to pursue custody of one child, he should be doing so for both. It was obvious that Alex realized he was losing, and the panic was written all over his face. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Not only did Alex fail in his bid for full custody, but he was also ordered to continue paying child support for both Luke and Lila. The relief I felt was immense, but I wasn't exactly celebrating. This whole ordeal had drained me, and I knew it wasn't truly over. Alex would likely come up with another plan eventually. That's just how he is. After the hearing, Alex and Fiona left without saying a word, which was fine by me. I had no interest in talking to them. I just wanted to go home and hug my kids, knowing they were staying right where they belonged. When I got back, I sat down with Luke and Lila, releasing a deep sigh of relief. I didn't burden them with the details of what had gone on in court. I didn't want them involved more than they already were. But I made sure they understood just how much I loved them, and that I would always stand up for them. So that's where things stand now. Alex is out of tricks, at least for the moment, but I'm not naive enough to think he's given up. He'll probably hatch a new scheme in a few months, but I'm ready for it. I've learned through all of this that being a parent means always being prepared for the unexpected, especially when dealing with someone as toxic as Alex. No matter what he tries next, I won't back down. These are my kids, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep them safe from his chaos.